Good afternoon and welcome to the 6th episode of Leadership Talks. This is a 20-minute Q&A we do every Thursday at 12:30 with an industry leader. And today's leader is Lessing or Les Gold, who is partner at Mitchell, Silberberg, and Knupp, LLC. Welcome, Les.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing your words. So this program is called Leadership Talks. So my first question is pretty simple. What is your leadership style, and how do you position yourself and your knowledge in the industry?
Well, I've been in the industry, I suspect, longer than most, and I've always tried to really respond to the needs of our clients who are in the security industry. We've always had a section of my law firm where we specialize in the industry. And we take the position normally that the client is always right. However, sometimes the clients aren't right, and when they aren't, we tell them. And I think that's what establishes leadership.
Excellent. How long have you been in the industry? I do have to ask that question because you said longer than most. And then, how did you start in our industry? What was your first real experience with the security industry?
Well, my first experience goes way back to the late 1950s, and I was asked to attend a meeting with a half a dozen, at that time, leaders of the security industry in Los Angeles, and it was interesting listening to them. And after listening to them for a while, they asked me if I can help them, and I told them they probably don't need my help, but if they start talking to each other as opposed to at each other, they would probably accomplish a great deal more than they had. And interestingly, the problems then were not much different than the problems they have today, although today the problems are much more sophisticated. But that's how I started. We formed an association here in Los Angeles with the original 6 members, all of whom, by the way, are now gone. And that ultimately led to what is now the California Alarm Association. And we did the first state legislation, which I actually put together. And California was the first state to adopt state legislation. And then we assisted a number of states thereafter to adopt alarm regulation, which has really, I think, influenced the industry very, very significantly over the years.
So, you may have just explained this, but, when I looked at the website, please explain what it means to be, the godfather to the security industry, because that's what it says. So where did that come from?
Well, I probably put together the contract that is in use today by all the alarm companies. There are various iterations, but that came about really as a result of, litigation, where you find out what's good, what isn't good. And I've been, at one point, I represented the National Burglar and Fire Alarm Association. I've done a lot of work for now it's the National Monitoring Association. I did a lot of work for them. I've represented the California Alarm Association. I testified before Congress on behalf of the industry. And I get calls quite often from the industry. Of course, I've done a column for many, many years, so that institute people to give us a call to find out what they can do. And we've actually grandfathered a great deal of legislation, which has been adopted throughout the country. And I suspect that that's the reason for the nomenclature.
Okay. So you put a lot of contracts out there is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get into kind of the meat and potatoes of what's going on in the industry. We see a lot of M&A activity. What do you see as some of the factors contributing to so much activity, at least first in the commercial integrator space, where you got companies like Convergent acquiring smaller, well-established integrators? Do you see this trend continuing, and what's causing the trend?
Well, you see, you're talking about Convergent. They've done an outstanding job. The industry has been kind of interesting, and people ask me why I feel that it's going about the way it has. So many of these alarm companies started in their garage, and then they build up to a certain level, and now it takes more than just the individual. You have to have management. So many of these companies have sold out. Many of these companies were mom and pop companies. They worked very, very hard, and basically it's a 24/7 business. So it really was conducive to, the smaller company, the bigger company gobbling up the smaller company, then the next bigger company gobbling them up. And one of the interesting things that I did, we actually started Protection One, where an investment banker in New York called me, and he had this great idea, and we put together the Protection One operation. And over a period of 5 years, I think they made something like 200 acquisitions where they just kept gobbling them up, and ultimately Protection One was gobbled up. They had gone public, went public on the New York Stock Exchange, were gobbled up, and they've had 3 or 4 various iterations. But it's true in this traditional alarm industry, and it still exists today. The number of acquisitions is just it's kind of amazing. But over the years, I can't tell you how many hundreds and hundreds of acquisitions, both buyer and seller, that we've been involved in. I'd say probably somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000. And for a law firm itself to be involved in that many really speaks just words and words for the industry. That's what they do, and it's no different. I think with the present iteration of ADT, Protection One, Johnson Control, and Tyco, temporarily, I think you've taken some of the acquirers out of the equation, but I think they'll be back in, and I think that the acquisition aspect will continue.
Excellent. Yeah, it's amazing the activity that's out there. And so, what about the supplier side of things? What's driving all of these mergers that we see lately? Like, I think it was just a couple weeks ago, IP Datatel and Resolution Products and JCI. What about the suppliers?
Well, suppliers has been different. For many years early on, every time a supplier came up with a new product, they were all smaller companies, and effectively, if somebody came up with a new product which was innovative, everybody else did it. So competitively, it was very, very difficult for the smaller companies to really become financially successful. Ademco Pitway jumped into the act, and they certainly became the major player. They were ultimately acquired by Honeywell, and now, and it's no secret, I think we've all read about it, Honeywell is looking to sell off that division. It's a different world out there today because the industry has become so much more sophisticated. We're computer, the internet, and this has really helped the industry, and it's helped so many companies really expand their reach. And it's a different world out there today. The suppliers are much more sophisticated, and they're becoming more and more successful.
Yeah. So let's go full circle. We talked about the integrators, we talked about suppliers. What about in the financial world as far as financial investments?
When I first started in this industry, no one would finance an alarm company because unless banks had hard assets to secure their loans, they just wouldn't make loans. And actually, we were successful here in Los Angeles in getting a bank, which was then Union Bank, which is now owned by a Japanese company. We got them to loan to a half a dozen local companies, and we showed them how successful type of lending is. That's cash flow lending as opposed to hard asset lending. And they made actually 6 loans in the industry. They were very happy with them, but they ultimately got out because all 6 companies were acquired by larger companies. But it's a different world today. Today, you can go out and get banks and private equity groups to lend or invest in the industry, so that effectively smaller companies can acquire larger companies because they can get the financing, and it's become a major business for a number of banks who are, have looked at the industry and said, hey, cash flow lending is a good idea, and many banks are doing it today. So funds are available, and as a matter of fact, the private equity funds, generally speaking, are loaded with cash and are looking for opportunities.
The security industry certainly has them. So there's a topic that I want to get into, but before I get into that, I want to just ask about what would you say are the best strategies when making an acquisition, and or from the other side, if you're looking to get acquired, as far as getting into the financials, the valuation of the company. You just talk to that just for a few minutes as far as what you would look at as best strategies for, again, whoever's looking to get acquired or buy.
Well, there's no substitute for acquiring a good, well-run company. And that, of course, requires due diligence, and there's three types of due diligence. You have your operational due diligence, which, of course, the company must do. You have your financial due diligence. You have your legal due diligence. And, every major company, every successful company gets involved in all three of those areas. And if that occurs, then, of course, cash flow companies are very, very successful because, when you get into recessionary areas, people want and they need security. So generally speaking, they get hurt the least. To a certain extent, their business may be impacted a little bit, but over the years, if you look at the companies who have provided security, the growth has been really consistent. And even in difficult times, there might be a little blip, but they go back up. So they effectively, it's a good business. It's a cash flow business, and I think again, it's going to continue.
So there's you hear about DIY. All right, we're going to talk about the more residential right now. The buyers are getting more savvy when it comes to systems and doing it themselves. We see companies like Best Buy jumping into the security industry and selling their products and installing through their quote unquote geek squad. You've got Honeywell, who's now putting out a DIY system. You've got Nest. The list is getting bigger. Is it that our industry is just finally realizing that there's an opportunity, with the DIY market? And so would love your opinion on it. And then talk about the
DIY market is not new. You've had companies for the last 15, 20 years, but they've never been particularly successful because most of the people who've gone in and bought these systems outright, they install it, but most of them end up as being closet systems where they're not used. Today it's different because the industry has said, you know what, it's an opportunity because even though people buy these things and install them, the probability is they still want to monitor them, so that they're going to the alarm companies, the traditional alarm companies, to monitor. And and so it has become an interesting source. I've spoken to many companies, and we've represented the DIY companies, and we get inquiries consistently from alarm companies how you deal with the DIY. We also get licensing issues because the municipalities or the states, the question is how are they going to monitor the monitoring companies? And effectively, if a monitoring company takes over a DIY system, it's certainly a benefit because the real opportunity for success in the security industry really is in the monitoring, because it's monthly revenue that comes in every single month, no matter what. So it becomes a benefit. Now, if someone just comes in and on a DIY system and they install it themselves and do nothing, then of course there's no particular benefit to the alarm company, except when they don't work or they don't properly activate it, and there is a loss, then it's great for the alarm company because people are going to immediately call the alarm company.
Right. Do you have any stats on the percentage of DIYs that become professionally monitored and those that don't?
I really don't. I mean, I've seen some, but I really don't have any statistics on it myself. So I couldn't tell you. I don't know, but it's a good question. It's something I probably would be interested in looking into.
Yeah. And do you,
You know, DIY is strictly, yeah, DIY is strictly residential. It's not commercial.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's a little bit harder to determine. You know, one of the questions that I've asked is, what is the penetration just of residential systems? And it's kind of interesting because 10, 15 years ago, I heard the penetration was 20-25%. And I was at the conference last week, and they said the penetration is 20%. So either our statistics are wrong or they're not really paying attention.
Yeah, I think I've heard also 20-25%. I've been hearing that for years, and I'm not sure it's changed. But that means there's, 75 to 80% of the market that, is an opportunity. I look at it as an opportunity. But
well, when you start to look at it, when they were talking 20-25% 15 years ago, you didn't have, well, you had, Protection One, which was a residential company, but you didn't have the Vivint's of the world, or the door-to-door. And they made a tremendous impact on residential sales. And that's why when I saw last week that they estimate that the penetration is 20%, it really surprised me because I would think it would be a lot higher than that.
Huh, yeah. You hit on a point when talking about DIY and that savvy homeowner, because it is residential. Could you look at this as, kind of a stepping stone for them, once they either realize they need service or, realize they need, monitoring, professionally monitored, system, they now have kids and their life is changing. So do you see it as a stepping stone to full security, system?
Oh, absolutely. I think DIY could be a tremendous opportunity for the entire security industry. There are so many ramifications to it. And of course, you have the smart home situation where, and the smart home now they're starting to provide security as part of the smart home, which is another opportunity for the security companies. But I think DIY, I think people are going to begin to realize, just for the reasons that you mentioned, how important security is. And I just think it could be a tremendous bonanza for the entire industry.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. I guess, is there any particular technology out there today that you see as up and coming, anything new that, you're kind of looking at the industry as a whole. So do you see any real trends in technology that's going to carry us a little further, 5 years or so? That's going to be exciting?
Well, I stay away from technology because I figure the people in the industry know a lot more about it than I do. But,
okay.
You see the doorbells. There's this company out of Korea that that's come up with a fairly it's not a new system, but they've combined the facial recognition, the iris, the veins, and the fingerprinting, into one. And I'm somewhat familiar with that company. We've do some work for them, but that's not new technology, but it's taking existing technology and really upscaling it very, very significantly.
Right.
I think you've got the internet and there's so much technology, sensing devices and all, and the opportunities where they're looking at implanting in people so that you follow exactly where they are, where they're going. So the technology is there, but as I say, I stay away from it. I think I leave that to the experts.
That's probably a good idea. I do as well. That's why I asked the questions. But we got about 30 seconds because again, this is a 20-minute program. So, is there anything you want to leave with our, viewers and readers, regarding the financial? I want to go back to that financial side of the industry and the M&A side. Is there anything you want to leave with them that could be helpful as they think about their futures?
Well, as a lawyer, I have to say, when you're dealing with the public in today's day and age, you have to have a contract. You want the contract to protect you. You want the subscriber to know exactly what they're getting. And, we're an emergency personal service business. And I think those companies who provide emergency personal service, and I emphasize personal service, I think they're going to do exceedingly well in the future. And as I say to them, conduct your business in a business-like, ethical fashion, and there's no substitute for that. And I would say that if you do that, you're going to be very, very successful in the future. I think the opportunity today is just enormous because of all the new technology and the marketing opportunities that exist out there. I just think it's a great industry to be in.
Well, I have to agree with you, and I thank you for your words. So Les Gold, thank you for joining us today. So anybody listening, this will be posted on the SSN Leadership Talks YouTube channel. And I do have to make a quick plug here for our Cloud Plus conference. If you're interested in cloud-based technology and solutions, Cloud Plus is November 28th and 29th in Austin, Texas. You can see the website at ssncloudplus.com for details. And I guess next week we talk to George DeMarco, and I look forward to that. So Les, thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Bye-bye.